Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Friday, June 7th. Derek Van Riper, Trevor May, Saris, all here with you on this episode. Major League Baseball returns to London. We got a two-game series this weekend between the Phillies and Mets. We'll talk about the implications of that. We had an epic showdown this week between Paul Skenes and Shohei Ohtani. It was all anybody could talk about once that happened on Wednesday. So we're going to dig deeper into that matchup, and we're going to have our game plan segment outlining how we would pitch to Shohei Ohtani or instruct someone else to pitch to Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah, I would tell someone else to pitch.
Generally, good choice for you.
Trevor, you pitch.
We're also going to talk about two teams facing a critical stretch of the schedule, the Blue Jays and the Cubs, and try to get a sense for what they might be doing as the trade deadline approaches just under 2 months from now. And if we get an update on Juan Soto, the health of his forearm, we'll pass that along as well. He's been sent for some imaging. So we begin with the series in London. Baseball is back in London. Of course, the Cubs and Cardinals split a 2-game set abroad last season. We have seen some very high-scoring games in the previous iterations of the London series, going back to 2019 when the Yankees and Red Sox combined for 50 runs in 2 games, 50-5-0. It was 92 degrees for a game in which those two teams combined for 30 runs. And then there was, of course, a 20-run game. The next day, temperature dropped by 20 degrees. But it was the most runs ever scored in consecutive games in that rivalry. That's how much offense was juiced then. They did make some changes to the dimensions. They moved the center field fence back a few feet for that 2023 series. And good news if you're at the game this weekend, mild temperatures expected. So we're not going to have a 90-degree day juicing up offense as they play at London Stadium again. But, you've been in a position of trying to be a baseball fan in London, and you had a previous love for the game. What were the challenges that you ran into trying to love baseball abroad?
Time zones, man. It's like a real thing. I mean, y'all remember when the Korean games were on, and at least in Korea, they have local baseball. They have a local tradition of liking baseball. When I was in London, I was trying to watch games at all times. Basically, the only games that are viable at all on a regular schedule are 1 o'clock weekend games. You can see those at 9 p.m. in London. So that means you're limited to basically seeing 1 or 2 games of your favorite team. If you became, a fan like I was, you could see 1 or 2 games a week. And then on top of that, you don't have the same streaming abilities. There's like, can you even see it is one question. And then let's say it gets to be World Series time and you want to see it with other people. Now, I bring this up because football, and I bet you part of this is football did it, we want to globalize like football, football is once a week. And so there are pubs. I saw them in Frankfurt. There's American bases. So there are pubs near American bases where expats get together with people who just love football, and they go on late on Sunday nights and they see the 1 o'clock games and maybe a little bit of the beginning of the 4 o'clock games. But that's it. But football is once a week. So you could do that and you're not missing that much. You're seeing most of your team's games. Can't do that with baseball. There's not that same tradition. London doesn't have American military bases nearby. The people that'll be at the games will be a large part expats, because like me, people who are there who still like baseball and be like, whoa, we can get to see baseball. Some people that'll be the green shirt memo. Some people that will be there for the novelty of it. Just because, what is this? Like, baseball's here. Let's go check it out, But I don't know that it'll create lasting people because it's just not really set up. The pubs there can be open all night. They aren't usually. They usually close at 1. And it takes a separate license to be open at like 3 or 4 in the morning, which is when you would have to be open if you wanted to watch a World Series game. So I don't know what kind of lasting footprint you're putting there. I think it's one of those things that works in novelty, but if we ever say like try to have a team in London, I don't think it would work. So I don't really know what the lasting effect of this will be. It's just maybe a few more social media impressions in Europe that you can report to your bosses, and I don't know that it'll actually have a big effect on the future of the game.
I mean, Trevor, I know that you, just like and I, want to expand baseball. We want it to be as amazing as possible. Does this achieve that? Do the series in London actually help grow the game in a tangible sort of way?
Yeah, I think it's the same. I think Europe's just tricky because of the way that our time zones are different. Like a 9 hour difference, because like London's one of the more, it's fairly west too. So if you get deeper into the continent, it's even worse. And when you're flip flopping, like it's a 9 to 12 hour difference, it's middle of the night when it's middle of the day. So like it's just so hard. It's honestly one of the major reasons why soccer, or European football, as I'm going to call it right now, is slower to grow here. I think there's a lot of people that want more sports, but it's just in the middle of the night. Like you can't.
You'd rather watch it live. Like watching recorded.
You'd rather watch it live.
Fun.
And
then
commentate
you can be on
live.
Twitter and like
so social media is more valuable then for you, and like you can participate with more people watching it. My brother-in-law's English, and he has to get up at 3 a.m. to watch his Sheffield United Blades lose. So get relegated.
Luton Town, what up?
So it's the same thing for at least this series specifically. Now the Mexico City, the Puerto Rico, the Japan, Korea, like these are all places that getting support from Major League Baseball and having a stronger connection because they have a history of baseball already, I think is probably adding more value to the game, at least right now. But it is fun. It's a special event that breaks up the monotony of the season a little bit, and because there are games every day and every single and it does get a little bit like the same Groundhog's Day a little bit, even for fans. So I think there's value there, but I don't know if the return on the investment, at least for the European side of things, is going to long term really make any lasting impact.
I think if you're a fan of baseball already, you're more excited about games at Rickwood Field this season, just because it's a venue that has such historical significance, right? It's more in that vein that a typical fan's going to get excited. Whereas if you watch a team all season, you're almost irritated that the game's at a different time, or if you have season tickets, you're not going to this game, or if you are going to go to the game, it's going to cost you a ton of money to follow your team there. We're asked by the Live Hive, is this really just a ploy to sell merch? This is an incredible shirt that was released. Mets Junior 69 gets the photo credit for this one. It is a Hawaiian shirt featuring the logos of both the Phillies and the Mets, two rivals.
Neither of their colors either.
It's a really muted Hawaiian shirt, which I think the best Hawaiian shirts have a lot of character, a lot of bright colors on them. So this one was going to set you back 114 pounds. That's about $105 US. I'm curious, in what circumstances would either of you wear this shirt? I think you carry pretty strong Hawaiian shirt vibes, at least out of the three of us. I think you'd be the most likely to pull one off. But could you even dare wear this shirt anywhere?
I have some Hawaiian shirts and I have some novelty shirts. I have a shirt that says in big capital letters, "It's okay not to drink." And I wear it very rarely. And this is one of those things that I would have in my closet that I'd be like, thinking about wearing, and my wife would be like, "No, put that right back." So, and the dumbest thing is that I don't know if other people have this problem. I do have like the 60% of my closet that I never wear or never touch, that I'm always like, but I could wear that if we were going to a joke baseball party where everyone wore their worst baseball paraphernalia.
A joke baseball party. That sounds amazing. I guess you could wear
kind of a good idea. Like a bad Christmas sweater party.
Yeah,
just like wear your worst baseball stuff,
your worst old jersey. Yeah, I guess there's a way around that.
You got some jersey on there with your own last name on the back, or
I've seen some real bad custom jerseys over the years, but that's a tough sell. That shirt in particular. But yeah, I think it is just trying to it's planting seeds. You may develop a small faction of fans in places where baseball doesn't have a large footprint by playing a series in London. They're going to do a couple more these next few years as well. Matchups, by the way, Ranger Suarez looks like he's on track to start on Saturday. So kind of interested to see where things go for him. He seems to be okay after getting hit in the wrist by a comebacker in his last outing. More of a thumb problem, I guess. Sean Manaea goes for the Mets. Taijuan Walker versus Jose Quintana on Sunday, by the way. I think
it'd be really nice to be one of the starters you didn't just name. have
Yeah,
a really fun off day in London.
That's kind of what you want, right? That's the sweet spot, Trevor. Like getting to travel but not having to play in these games would be the ultimate win. Yeah.
That's the goal every day, guys. Just be there, and but everyone else gets the job done. Classic relievers. Also, real quick before we move on to the subjects, I just want everyone to know that I am going to buy that shirt. And
when are you going to wear it?
Of the three of us, I did play for both those organizations, and on top of all of that, you mentioned the bad paraphernalia party. What I see that as a great shirt to wear when you're when you're making a YouTube video. So
there you go.
That's what those shirts are for. And I buy shirts for that reason almost exclusively at this point. So it's got to join the wardrobe, even though it is $145. We didn't mention that before. It is $145. But I think it's worth it.
I guess it goes next to I have like I think the boys at John Boy gave me this like airbrushed like Nolan Arenado thing with like wolves on it.
How are you not wearing that right now? That's the real question.
Well, because green shirts. It's not green, so
yeah, it's green shirt. I suppose.
Trevor, how often? This is a side question, not on the rundown, real quick, but like, how often did you get to enjoy a city that you didn't know that well, and did you take advantage of that? I saw Joey Votto said that like early in his career he did a little bit, and then later he just became like a hotel guy that was like, I go to my hotel, I've got the wine bottle, I've got the chest, and that's it. You know, like, what were you like on the road? Did you ever be like, oh, I've never been to Houston?
I'm the opposite of Joey in that I did that more later. And started to enjoy it a little bit more because everything was about getting ready for that day. So I was like super obsessed with the efficiency and getting enough rest. But in reality, I learned late that leaving your room in the morning and just kind of going on a little tiny adventure, it doesn't even have to be anything crazy, was way better for my energy and like getting me ready to play than sitting in my room and resting. Like
there's some science to that. I mean, you're getting light. You're getting light in the morning.
Light. Social, like you get energy from talking to people and like having to go and be social. That's a real thing. So what
was one of your favorite cities? Do you remember like a first experience in a city that you were like, that was pretty awesome? I'd never been to Toronto, and it was like awesome.
Toronto was a good example. Yeah, especially this last year. I spent a lot of time going around, did a lot of walking, tried to walk a lot, but popped into some like cool little stores and we were kind of near a cool place too, and there was a good restaurant that a bunch of us went and ate at when we got there. So that was cool. Chicago's another one that I would try to like go away from, the Michigan Avenue where everyone stays and where all the stuff is, and like go into one of the suburbs. We went to Second City once, which was super cool. When my wife was there, so that's probably the one I've explored the most, Chicago, or done the most extracurriculars.
I really like Toronto because it's such a multicultural city. I think it's pretty walkable. It feels pretty walkable. And they're like, you can kind of walk along certain pathways where you kind of just leave little neighborhoods behind. Like you kind of go from neighborhood to neighborhood and like different sort of ethnic regions basically within Toronto. And you see different kinds of foods, different smells. Like it's a really international city that I really enjoyed. I was there for pitch talks. So yeah, I can see that.
Big question coming out of the London series. Is there anything we should expect after this trip? A hangover effect from the extra mileage, right? Even if you perform well in London, are you worried about coming back with jet lag and having that drag your team down for a week or 2 weeks after this trip?
In the words of Pete Alonso, it's a choice. Jet lag's a choice. Which to an extent he is right. Like you can force yourself to stay up on that off day and just really kind of sacrifice your happiness in that off day to get yourself right, and that does work. Or you can do it really fast if you really want to, and that's really important to you. But again, you're only in London. You're not how often are you in London? So there's going to be guys with families and stuff that are there like, I can't just like stay up and then go to bed at like, I gotta.
Like you can try to keep your American schedule as much as possible. So
you either try to keep it or you just try to flip it and then just worry about flipping it back in 4 days. To be honest, the 1 day off as the buffer is simply not enough. It's barely.
It's really like most science says 3 days.
It's barely enough to like go, from the West Coast to the East Coast, which is a rule. You have to have an off day when you make that trip across, but it's not a rule the other way.
More.
I'll never forget. We had one of the. This was we played the Dodgers. We had a series and we had a back-to-back. We played Dodgers Giants in 2021, and they played us at our place, and then we went to their place right after. And that's the year, if you recall, the Dodgers and the Giants won 106 and 107 games. So this was a tough stretch. And we had the Sunday night game, Sunday night baseball in New York, and then the next day we played in San Francisco. So we had to fly into the night. But the Dodgers flew back and played the next day too. They got boat raced and we got boat raced. Both of us just got destroyed in our game back because we were used to, like, it was 1 a.m. to me when I went in the game, and it was the day before. So it was just like, why are we playing a night game when we both have to do this travel? I understand we're two good teams or two big markets, but like, maybe pick somebody else this time. And that just wasn't what they did, and no one seemed very happy about it. So that's 3 hours back. Now imagine 9 hours forward. It's don't be surprised if the next series they come back, guys might be dragging a little bit. You just see you don't see sharpness. You see guys kind of like with sunken eyes a little bit. They're just going to have to adjust. But you'll notice the guys who have been around for a while will probably be the most alert, the quickest. Because they know what they're doing.
Veterans know the espresso routine. There's some data on this, which is that I believe it's actually going. Oh man, I forget which direction is harder. There's actually some data on like which way is harder, but generally every time zone you cross makes you worse in the next game. So that there is in the numbers like travel fatigue, and that this might actually be some part of the picture for why the Mariners seem to kind of underperform versus their projections sometimes, or just come like a game short. The Mariners travel more than anybody else in baseball.
Yeah, we need expansion in the Pacific Northwest. I think that's been something we've been banging the table for several years now.
More games against
last year. Oakland A's went the farthest last year. I know that for certain.
Yeah, we should put a team in Oakland. That'd be interesting.
Put a team in Oakland.
Seems like a pretty good market.
Sacramento, that's more north.
Did you guys see
a little bit
the Oakland Ballers game? I mean, it was balling. Like they filled that place up. They were still kind of hammering it together when people showed up. They had vendors, they had trucks. I haven't seen a truck at a food truck at an Oakland game for 2 years now. So
Wakamatsu doing a good job over there.
Yeah, they showed that people like baseball in Oakland. That's not the problem.
That's never been the question, really. We've known for a long time people in Oakland love baseball. Let's talk about this matchup from earlier in the week. Paul Skenes and Shohei Ohtani, right? I think there's been a handful of plate appearances already this season where the baseball world, at least the online baseball world, has converged and sort of stopped and been in awe, right? And the first plate appearance between Paul Skenes and Shohei Ohtani was one that was circulating a ton. This is incredible. It's a 3-pitch strikeout.
101 inside.
All fastball.
100 up and in. 101 over the plate.
All fastballs, all swinging strikes. And people were like, oh, that was legit. That was just, hey, here's my fastball. Good luck. And you always wonder. You just wonder, like, okay, what's going to happen next time? This is the hardest thing to me about being a starter as opposed to a reliever. You're going to see that guy at least one more time, probably twice on a typical day. And Paul Skenes, we've talked about him. He's got 3 quality pitches. What's the outlook in the second plate appearance? What's your game plan there? What are you going to do differently? And this is where you start to wonder. We start at 2-2
off the plate, and then he tries to go to the same spot.
Yeah,
and it misses and leaks out over the plate, and Ohtani takes him yard.
So Ohtani gets his revenge right away. And I started to think about this from 2 angles. how much of that was the inexperience of Paul Skenes relying very heavily on his fastball? The pitch that Ohtani homered on was the 7th fastball he saw in 9 pitches over those 2 plate appearances. And how much of that falls on Skenes? How much of that falls on Yasmani Grandal, who was behind the plate catching for the Pirates on Wednesday? Because I would imagine for most of Paul Skenes' baseball life, he could get away with that. He could throw fastball after fastball after fastball, and most hitters he's seen to this point in his life weren't going to catch up and do damage like that on that pitch.
Yep. This is really interesting. There's a few things to notice here, and I noticed this in his first outing as well. So I'm going to try to quickly hit on some of these points. The thing about where Paul is in his career, there's not a lot of innings in the professional scene. Grandal is a veteran, but you're going to call their best pitch until someone tells you otherwise. And he is right now in the getting experience. So giving up a homer like that is actually really important for his development, because one thing I did notice is his patterns are pretty stark in terms of, like, I think that the words I used was like, he pitches, he's definitely fresh out of college. He pitches in a college way because he was so much better than most of the people. Like,
is
to
this
the point
like
where he can
establish
tell
the
them.
establish the
Yeah.
fastball, and then start working in the other pitches as you go along in the second and third?
Yeah. And
To your point, he
counts-
hasn't had, how many times he's gone third time through the lineup in pros, even in the minors? Probably like
0
twice,
times,
3
probably. I
times
think
now.
maybe once or twice he's even gotten in, and that there's a
Yeah.
point to that too. And that's a new layer he's going to have to learn. I've been mentioning this a lot. Like, we're not going to get another Max Scherzer if no one ever does it in the minors. It's true, but he's got to do it at the big leagues. Now, I think that he is smart enough and he has got the work ethic enough. Like, everyone who says he picks up things so quickly, that he's going to realize this stuff. And Grandal knows how to catch. He's been a good catcher for a long time in terms of calling games. So it's just a learning experience in there. But he does get very pattern oriented. For example, he doesn't throw sliders to lefties for strikeouts. He only throws it over the plate for a strike. He never throws it with 2 strikes. He only throws a splitter and only a fastball. So, like, eliminating pitches with him is easier than most people right now, when he learns to kind of eliminate that a little bit, learns that he can have confidence in pitches that he didn't need to, like throwing a slider for a strikeout in college. He didn't want to. He no one could touch his fastball. So, like, it was just taking a risk that he didn't need to take. And so he would just blow him away. And now he's going to have to do that, especially with a guy like Shohei. The thing about Shohei is he learns and he takes shots and takes big swings, and he misses a lot. Like, sometimes he lulls you into a false sense of security. So Paul's feeling really good about that fastball. His whole life, no one's touched it really. And maybe he was like, he's not going to be able to hit it because I have a really good one today. But Shohei Ohtani is one of the front runner for the MVP. And he can get to it. If you do it enough, he can get to it. But he learned that. So there's things that he's going to adjust to. It's going to be really interesting to see, like, the next 5, 6, 7 outings for Paul, how these patterns start to adjust a little bit and how he adjusts in real time. But it was interesting. And one last thing too, there's a rule of thumb that I didn't actually learn until a little bit later in my career, that makes a lot of sense. And we would generally think this way. He yanked that fastball. Usually when you're trying to throw the same pitch again, when it was off the plate, if that means you're bringing it back over the plate in order to get it. So if he was trying to throw it up and in, you're bringing him back over the plate. The chances that if you miss that spot, go wet and he hits it hard, go way up. So if he wanted to go fastball there, he needed to go up and away. But I don't know if he's as comfortable as, if I throw this up and away, if I miss, it's a ball, I'm going to walk him. And that's why he tried to go in, because he knew I can leak over the plate and maybe my fastball is good enough to get, like, he didn't touch it before. So even if I make a mistake here, I still might get a swing and miss. And then it was a homer. Like, that is probably what happened.
And earlier in the way that he got to that 3-ball count, if I remember correctly, he threw 2 changeups that didn't hit the zone. So you've got, Paul Skenes, Shohei Ohtani, at an 0-1 count, he threw a changeup that missed down and in, or down and away, and then in a 1-1 count, he threw another changeup that missed, or a splitter, basically. And so basically in that 3-2 count, he was saying, well, I've tried twice to hit my changeup in the zone. I've got a lefty here with 2 strikes. And so my choices are fastball, changeup, and I can't get the changeup in the zone right now, or to this batter, or I don't want to. So I'm going to go with my number 1. But As we'll see from some of the heat maps, I wonder if there wasn't a better choice in location. Up and away is one, although that is a strength for Ohtani.
Yeah.
He has this kind of foot in the bucket, like he clears his hips and then he brings, it's really weird. The swing has some resemblance to Ichiro's, but it's like the power version of that.
Max power version. Yeah, for sure.
And so I think like that's why Ohtani's best power is actually oppo, like sort of oppo center, because he does that Chris Davis, the K too, where he like kind of steps in the bucket, brings through. And so when he's coming through, it's a little bit more of a bat path that's going to go oppo rather than a pull. I mean, he does pull, obviously, but he lets the sort of location on that one was pulled. But that's more of a location-based pulling. Like I think his on most balls. So like out over the plate has its own problems. I mean, you know, if you look at, let's say we got his fastball heat map here. And so out over the plate is a problem. If you're looking at this, it's all red over there for Shohei Ohtani. And you can see why they might have thought in on his hands was a good idea, because there are some spots in there that are lower. But if you're asking someone to hit that little 3-inch by 3-inch box and not the one next to it, I think you're in trouble. So I don't really like, when I look at this, I don't like any high fastballs to Ohtani. I want to throw him low fastballs. And I know that's not always the best, but Skenes does not have a riding fastball. He has a fastball with lateral movement. So I would have had him throw that, low and away, basically, this is going to be a theme with him. Low and away is not a place that you would throw a sinkerish type fastball to lefties in the past. But if you can see here, sinker, low and in, the front door is open for Ohtani. And then if you look at sliders, like there's actually the next slide is sliders. It's actually blue near his back foot and low and away. So basically Ohtani's strengths are counter to what the normal lefty strengths are. He's good out over the plate and up and away. He's not actually as good back foot down, drop the hammer. He's actually not that good low and away. He mostly just tries not to swing at that. So I know it's tough to rely on command, but generally you're working in bluer spots. You know what I mean? Like when they were trying to hit up and in, there was a little white spot they could have hit, but there was a lot of red around it. If you have a little bit more margin for error if you pitch Ohtani low. And so I would focus on, if I had a sinker, I'd try to front door him low and then do a back footer low and just be peppering that area with movement from different directions, basically. And that would be my plan to Ohtani and if I didn't have a sinker, I would still just throw him a low four-seamer and play my slider off of that. So I would just like kind of a lower lowest approach would be my approach with Ohtani.
Do you think that's a good approach?
Yeah, I agree with that a lot. I think that he has also over time adjusted his swing to be able to get that top of the zone. I think that's one of the big reasons he's kind of blossomed into the hitter he is now too, because he has a natural swing to block. So like he's got that swing path. He can do it naturally pretty well. And so they got him thinking about this. There is a couple major things that I have in my report that I've never mentioned, I don't think, on this show. And one of the things I look at is where first pitch swings are for certain pitch types, because that infirms that guys who swing at the first pitch are looking for something specific. And if they
want it to be a happy zone, like that's like a happy zone. You got to my happy zone. Otherwise, I'm not going to swing.
You're throwing exactly where I want to crush it, and I'm going to swing at that every single time. That is like the first thing that great hitters decide to do. And so if you go look at first pitch swing, especially guys who swing fairly regularly in first pitch, you can get a good idea of what they're trying to do and how they feel like they're going to be pitched.
Where are Ohtani's first pitch swings?
All up and in.
Yeah.
It's a big red spot that moves up and in. Yeah, he chases out the plate sometimes, but he sees big. So he's made a concerted effort to get to that pitch. I think they were just acting on what they had seen in the at bat before, because of course you don't have a ton of experience yet, and you haven't faced Ohtani. You only faced him once, and based on what you saw, you went with it. And honestly, that is generally the best thing to do if you're not quite certain you don't have the experience yet, but you need to make sure that whatever happens, you then learn from that for next time. So first pitch tells us a lot, and then the slider down and in is something that wasn't there before and has become there more, I think, over the last probably 162 games. Because, like, in the zone, it's hilarious if you overlaid the slider blue zone for Aaron Judge and the slider blue zone for Shohei Ohtani. They're in the exact same spot, but they're lefty and righty hitter. I would throw the same slider to both those guys because they just can't hit it hard. But the problem is the risk of mistake slightly over the plate. For example, if you miss off, if you go back foot to Shohei a 1-2 and he takes it because it's just not, it's a not competitive or whatever, he gets out of the way, and then you try to bring it back over the plate, and that is when you're giving him the best chance.
Then you'll do the same thing they did with the fastball.
And
you
the
give them a look.
you leave that in the middle go up as well because your eyes are actually moving back as well. And if you leave it in the plate, both those guys, it's like I can't hit it if you get it past this little line of demarcation. But if you miss 1 inch the other side, my xWOBA then goes to 1,000. So that's the risk reward. It's high risk, high reward. And unfortunately, those two guys, that's kind of the one blue spot. So you have to take high risk, high rewards. That's why they're the players they are.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about, that first pitch approach, Trevor. If you see that tendency and you see a place where you can maybe get a first pitch swing and you're Paul Skenes and you have that fastball, you could know that he wants to swing at that pitch and challenge him there because your pitch is good enough, right? At a certain threshold, Skenes should be above the threshold where he can try to poke the bear a little bit.
I mean, you want swings at your dominant pitches, right?
Yeah. And or the vice versa, because there's just the down in the way is blue. He'd be like, he's going to give me that for free. He just doesn't want it. So he doesn't want that.
I think early in the count, I would be not necessarily looking for swings. I'd be looking for free strikes.
Exactly. So that's most of the time. Most of the time, yeah. Relievers might go for swings, especially if it's like you're a guy with a cutter that throws hard. You can throw up and in because you want a ground ball double play or something.
Right.
Like you want an early contact and you have a pitch that knows it's going to light their eyes up, but they're not going to be able to get it on the barrel. That's something you might be confident, give you more confidence in it. But that's kind of a very specific situation. And it's a little bit more rare.
Yeah.
I think we dabbled with the idea of Paul Skenes maybe having a cutter at some point down the road that would make him even more filthy, right? Yeah. Just bring that. Have a fastball that moves in on a lefty like that.
And his fastball, like his fastball, his other pitches have the profile of someone that might be able to do it.
Yeah, he does.
Could make him extra nasty. One last thought on this before we move on. I noticed that in the third plate appearance, they started him off differently. They went slider change fastball completely.
And they were trying to steal a strike with that slider, and they got it. We'll show that real quick. They slider in on his hands, or no, slider away. And that's what you're talking about, Trevor, is the idea that he's basically trying to steal a strike. That's a backdoor slider.
Yeah, and he doesn't swing at those first pitch either. There's blue there.
Right. So they did what they wanted to there. And again, the changeup not in the zone. And that's what set up a high fastball again that Ohtani put into play for a single, I believe.
Yeah, caught too much plate with it too. Was out over the middle part of the plate. So by that point, Ohtani had seen enough times that he wasn't going to.
But it's also the same mistake twice, kind of.
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised. There's not a single fastball from Skenes low in the zone to Ohtani.
It took a different path to be wrong or beaten the second time. At least I guess that's learning in some sort of way.
That's right. He threw other pitches.
He stepped on a new rake. It's the mantra of the Raking Barrels in 2024. We're stepping on new rakes this season. That's the game plan. That's how you pitch to Shohei Ohtani. It's that easy. We say it every time.
I think, I think one thing that makes it even harder is that I think there's been such a focus on pitching high in the zone that maybe people's command low in the zone is not as good as it once was because, you're like, I want to dot it up here. I'm thinking about up here. I'm thinking about up here. Like, especially low and away, to have a low and away blue zone right now, I think as a lefty, you're probably not a lot of pitchers who've been doing we need Leo Mazzoni back, start dotting low and away with sinkers and maybe it'll work again.
Yeah. Less vulnerable to those pitches in 2024 than you would have been 20, 30 years ago. Let's move on to At the Fork. This is a segment in which we're taking a look at some teams that are kind of in the middle of the pack right now in terms of playoff odds and record and trying to figure out what direction they should go, both short and long term. And of course, their upcoming schedule and how they perform between now and the trade deadline will probably nudge them in one direction or the other. But we're going to start with the Blue Jays. They're the first team we're looking at as a team clearly at the crossroads. They are 30-32 entering play on Friday, 14 games behind the Yankees with a 19% chance of making the playoffs according to Fangraphs, only 5.2% chance according to Baseball Reference. It's weird because just a few years ago, we thought the Blue Jays were that next perennial great lineup that top to bottom, they would do damage, they wouldn't strike out, and they'd just be a problem 1 through 9 for opposing pitchers to deal with. It just hasn't really been that way. Last season hasn't been that way. This season as well. They're hitting 234 with a 310 on base as a team, only a 370 slug. And I know we're in a down offensive environment through the first 2 months and change of this season, but just a shade below league average by WRC Plus with a team 98. So
what did you say their chances of making the playoff were? I'm looking at Fangraphs. They've got 19%.
19% according to Fangraphs, 5.2% though according to Baseball Reference.
Whoa.
Yeah, no love from the Baseball Reference projections. Now, the power thing is the strangest part, I think, for the Blue Jays, right? Only 5 teams in Major League Baseball have hit fewer home runs than the Blue Jays this year. And some of it comes back to what they do with barrels. They're 21st in pulled barrels. They're tied for 19th if you combine last season with this season. So this isn't a new sort of problem for them. Lots of directions to go here, but who's responsible for this Blue Jays lineup falling short to this point? How much of this is on the players? How much of this is on the coaching staff? And is there a problem perhaps of organization and talent maybe being just on different pages right now?
Yeah, what's strange about it to me is that, like, you've got some other teams that are making the similar adjustment. So Cleveland has been very pro making contact. San Diego right now leads the league in batting average and is second in strikeout rate. And you've got Toronto, and Houston's always been, it is again a league leader in strikeout rate, and it's always been a bet there. But the real good teams pair that with power. So San Diego is singling people to death. They're near the bottom of the league in ISO. And Cleveland has been surging in power. Houston's always put together good power with that strikeout rate. Kansas City right now, 19% strikeout rate, 159 ISO. Toronto, 19.2% strikeout rate, 136 ISO. So, like, if you are going to focus on making contact, it has to be powerful contact. Slugging is more predictive of future success for your team than OBP right now. And I think it's just a slugging game. And some of it's personnel. Bo Bichette is just a guy who goes the other way. Some of it is, I think, just randomness. Like, George Springer has been changing his profile. He's been pulling the ball a little bit more and having more success recently. But some of it might be a decision, and some of it might be a decision, as Jeff Good brings up, that the park changes have made it a little bit rough on the hitters. Maybe they feel they need to go the other way more. You'll see park changes, even if the hitters don't say they don't change for the park. You know, Boston lefties push the ball, and Boston righties pull the ball for the Green Monster. I bring this up all the time. So if there is a change in Toronto, even without them knowing, they could be changing their approach. And whatever it is right now is not their best approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think on a player-by-player level, you look at Bo Bichette and George Springer. They've been well below projections for the first 2 months and change. Alejandro Kirk, too. He doesn't come up as often as a disappointing player, only because he's not necessarily a core guy for them. He's more of like a secondary part of that lineup.
But he was a guy that made a lot of contact, and it was powerful, and now he's just making a lot of contact.
Yeah, the quality of the Kirk contact has gone down considerably since he arrived. Justin Turner is finally showing some signs of age, but not to the point where you could blame him. And I think when the Jays aren't humming, Vlad Jr. kind of gets a lot of blame and doesn't always deserve it. He's missing a few homers this year. That's the one part of his profile that's a little light, but otherwise he's actually been fine in terms of his overall value. And I also think you have to take a macro look at Vlad Jr., right? If you look at players during the wild card era, going back to 1995, guys that have 3,000 or more plate appearances through their age 25 season, compare him to sort of like players, guys that debuted young, got a lot of experience. He's not playing at the level of Pujols or Miguel Cabrera or the first ballot Hall of Famers. And I think when Vlad Jr. arrived in the big leagues, there were expectations that he could be that kind of player, right?
Yeah.
But as a hitter, he's performed more like Manny Machado or Rafael Devers. I realize they play on the opposite corner, but that's a pretty good baseline to have through age 25. Even Freddie Freeman, in
Even
terms
this
of
year, you can't
runs
blame it all
created.
on him. He's been nearly 40% better than league average.
Yeah, and I've seen some reactions to, Vlad Jr. trade rumors that were like, if my team trades for Vlad Jr., I'm giving up on my team. And it's like, wait a minute. Like, he's still good. Like, just because he's not a Juan Soto or a Miguel Cabrera or an Albert Pujols doesn't mean he's without value. So I do think blame is inappropriately placed on Vlad Jr. at times. We've talked a lot about him in this show as someone that has some ways that he could maybe adjust to unlock power more consistently. But his per 162 home run average is 30. He's a 30 home run guy year over year up to this point in his career. I don't know what else people
with a great
actually want from
OBP,
him.
great contact, great batting average. Like,
Yeah.
the defense goes up and down, but I mean, I think he's Devers and Machado make a lot of sense because there were some flaws to their game, and they're not. I mean, they could be Hall of Famers depending on the back half of their careers, really, and longevity. So, I tend to look at these things though in terms of like which way should they go from a little bit of a sort of front office perspective. And so what I see is, a lot of this talent is under contract for next year. And I'll be losing Justin Turner, Yusei Kikuchi, Kevin Kiermaier, Jimmy Garcia, Daniel Vogelbach, Danny Jansen, Trevor Richards. It sounds like a lot, but it's going to give me some money. When those guys leave, I get another sort of $45 million to spend. I have Kirk. So if I let Jansen go, I have a guy who can play there. 2 relievers, a backup DH, a guy who's been transitioning to backup center field, and an aging DH type in Justin Turner. Like the hardest thing to replace here is Kikuchi. But if I was going to sort of play the middle as a front office executive there, I would trade Kikuchi, keep everybody else, and make another run next year. Try to spend that $40 million on short-term deals, on starting pitching. There's usually like Corey Kluber for 1 year and $10 million, that type. There's going to be people like that where you can buy some veteran starting pitching and just hope for better years from your stars at the same time.
Yeah, Trevor, do you buy that the window is still really open for Toronto? I mean, you've got Vlad Jr. and Bo there through 2025. So you could kind of look at those two guys as the foundation and say, let's keep pushing chips in this year and next, and then go for the rebuild? Or are you better off saying, hey, look what Cincinnati did a couple of years ago. They may have torn it down a year quicker than some people would have, but they also didn't spend that much time rebuilding because they had guys that had some time left who had more value in the trade market
in their deals.
Yeah, can
you get more? You get more for Vlad
now.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's always about timing and like who's available as well. So those conversations are going to be constantly happening behind the scenes. Like, they have 4 guys they could go get, for a Vlad or whatever, just because it's the time someone needs him so badly at the trade deadline. Those things happen quick. But I would say a general strategy is wait till they're in their platform year before you make any massive decisions, especially when they're part of a core that you were counting on being this kind of your best chance at like a dynasty style success. And for the teams that don't have another core that's like growing, kind of like the Orioles have had over the last couple of years, now that core is up there and they're banking on this core being the team that does it. If you don't have another one that's in like high A or something that you're excited about, you're even more hesitant to make these decisions. So their pieces are weird. It's interesting because so many guys aren't free agents until after next year, or at least they're big players like Jordan Romano, like you mentioned, Bichette and Vlad. And I don't know who the next core would be. I don't know what the next group of prospects is and if they exist yet. And if you're building from we're trying to build a new core, you would wait to build that new core until you're certain this core isn't going to get the job done, and there's still time on that clock, in my opinion. So it's interesting. I feel like Kevin Biggio didn't really. He was supposed to be like the third musketeer there, and he didn't really kind of turn into that. He's a solid player, but the power wasn't quite there, and he's been okay, but he's not been on the same level. And so it's kind of a 2-horse race, and we mentioned they've been a little bit inconsistent. I don't know what the culture's like there either, so there's some of that going on. So it's really like, what can you get? And if a really sweet deal comes across the desk over there, and they're like, hey, we can get 3 prospects for Vlad, or we can Yimi Garcia will bring a prospect over because he's throwing really well this year, and everyone needs relieving health at the deadline. Those are interesting, and it'll be. I don't think they will tear it down, though, unless one of those deals comes through for one of the guys who they considered part of that up and coming core that they had for the last 5 years. Unless a great deal comes for that, I would assume they'll at least wait until the offseason to do something like this. And then there's 12 teams that make the playoffs. They can conceivably get in at 82 and 80. So like, it's harder to make that decision now. I don't envy GMs that have to make this decision now, because technically there's like 4 teams truly out of it at the deadline these days.
Yeah.
And so it's what do you do? What do you do? And the deal's got to be sweet. So I'm sure there's a lot of conversations happening, but pay attention to that.
I mean, the only nice thing about there being so few sellers is that if the Blue Jays decide to jump in, they will immediately have the best players to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And they could take advantage of it being a seller's market and maybe make off like bandits and be back in 3 years.
Go supply high demand. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's definitely something worth talking about. But the flip side is like, there are some decent free agents next year. Scherzer, Corbin Burns, Max Fried, Jack Flaherty's back on the market. So there's Shane Bieber's a free agent. He'll be recovering though. I don't know. Luis Severino. There's some pitching. You could just get Kikuchi back if you wanted. So I don't know. I tend to think conservatively, like they're gonna be like, no, we have these really good players, and at least right now they're saying give us another month.
Yeah, I think if they fall further below 500, if they fall 7-8 games below 500 between now and deadline time, then there's a little more pressure to say, okay, this isn't going to work. I'd see the case Trevor's outlined to say maybe wait till the offseason when you've got every team in the league possibly trading for some guys that would match up better with you on a trade. But in the current landscape where more teams make the playoffs, there could be an edge to having more in your cupboard to trade away. So that could be the thing that does entice them if things break just the right way. I think the three of us are more on the, you should keep going for it while this window is open, because your next window might be a little further away. The system's not great right now. You don't have a clear-cut impact, amazing position player yet. Arjun Nimala down the road could be that kind of guy, but Aurelvis Martinez and Addison Barger look like maybe solid regulars rather than guys that are going to make a massive difference once they get to the big league level. Let's shift over to the Cubs. I think the Cubs' direction is a little bit easier to parse because they are in the NL Central, right? They're only 5.5 games out of first place. They're 1 below 500 entering play on Friday, and it's reflected in the playoff odds. They're 39.3% chance of making the playoffs according to Fangraphs, 53.8% according to Baseball Reference. Kind of a mid-pack lineup so far, right there, 97 WRC+. A bit more swing and miss than the Blue Jays, who for their power deficiencies continue to do a good job tempering whiffs. The Cubs have that extra thump, though. The main thing, if you watch the Cubs, it jumps off the page to you. Their bullpen is bad. They need relievers yesterday, right? Their bullpen on the season has a 4.43 ERA. It's 23rd league-wide, a 1.37 whip, 25th league-wide. So there's traffic. They can't keep runners from coming around. Like, it's a problem right now. So beyond the bullpen, what else really needs to be fixed for the Cubs as they try to chase down the Brewers and make year one with Craig Counsell at the helm a success in Chicago?
Yeah, I think, one thing that I think there's a little bit more production needs to come out of some of their guys. I just wrote about Dansby Swanson today, and one of the weird things is he's hitting ground balls on balls that are kind of middle. And so there's something there. His pull percentage is like higher than it's ever been. So I think he's actually too far out in front, and he's rolling over things that he should be hitting for line drives. That's like a little bit of a timing issue. I think he's just sort of stuck, a little bit out in front, and he's got a good track record. He actually was doing a lot of things under the hood that made me think that he is a good bet. I found this secret sauce that if you are doing well at swinging at pitches in the zone and not at pitches outside the zone, and barreling the ball and hitting the ball hard, and you're less than league average, like every single player that did that last year got better in the second half. So Dansby Swanson, it seems like somebody who's going to do better in the second half. Seiya Suzuki is back. Cody Bellinger, you're hoping that he has another level. I mean, it's not, 15% above league average is not bad, but you want him to kind of go on a homer streak or something. So the offense, I would give them like a B- or something so far. They're not a top offense, but they've got some upside there. I tend to look at that relief squad. I think the starting pitching, it's not the best starting pitching in the world, but it could go if the offense gets a little better and if they improve the bullpen. But I don't see really obvious things they can do unless they trade for do an early trade for Tanner Scott, and say, well, I know the command is bad, but he would immediately have the best stuff in our bullpen. I think they're a little bit too happy sending Neris out there and saying the results are fine, but it's like that is not a really good closer. If you put Neris up against other closers in the league, he's bottom 5 maybe.
Yeah, Neris doesn't look like past versions of Hector Neris either, so that addition hasn't quite made the impact they would have expected. Trevor, how important is it for the Cubs to maybe get one starter that's a notch better than what they've got? Because when I look at their rotation, I see a lot of mid-rotation caliber guys, good pitchers, guys that get you through the regular season that are good at run prevention, but not necessarily guys that are going to be high quality, get through the lineup 3 times in the postseason against playoff caliber lineups. So is this a team that needs to go out and actually try to make a splashy acquisition for an ace that they could have even beyond this season? Or maybe are they looking at what mentioned on the horizon, guys like Fried and Burns and free agency going to 2025 and looking at that as their ultimate solution?
I would lean more towards the going to grab the Burns or Fried to be your like splash. At least like go and grab a 1-2. I mean, I'd say Burns is more of the take ball game 1 right now anyway, and then Fried's probably more of the 2 in my opinion. But like they, just because of the strikeout rates at the moment, but like that might be something that they're more comfortable in doing. But if they can grab a veteran guy that has had a high ceiling in the past and that they could get for not expensive, I don't know why I keep going to Severino in my head right now, because he has thrown well, not as well as of late, but he has thrown well and he's got good stuff. So
and he's a rental, so he won't cost you the best prospect.
Yeah, he's a rental, so it might shore that up a little bit. And then if it doesn't actually work out, right, it's not that big. It's you're in the same. Now you're just in the same boat, right? I think the bullpen is the biggest reason, and there's one big thing because I think that there's a mindset thing here that happens that sometimes gets looked over a little bit, the same way that the lineup does. So, for example, as Seiya gets going and becomes more of a weapon, then Cody Bellinger is going to get better. And so hitters or pitchers are now having to worry about more guys not beating you.
As Dansby starts hitting, now
Dansby
they're like
starts hitting.
They have to like really pitch for 5 guys in a row as opposed to like,
which then puts more pressure on you already before you throw a pitch. Yeah. And then that gets you more opportunities to hit. For example, Soto going to the Yankees would, in my opinion, like the reason Aaron Judge had his May is because Juan Soto was there. That he was able to do that because they were they got so worried about Soto because of how hot he was that and Judge was struggling. They started getting more mistakes, taking advantage of him. Then he just had a historic month, and those two being back to back, you can't pitch around both of them. So that needs that every team needs
traditionally
some
been hard to
play.
prove that lineup protection exists, but
yeah,
we do know, for example, that hitters hit better with people on base.
1,000%.
So that speaks to your sort of stress. Defend them better.
And this is very it's hard because it's isolated and anecdotal, and every pitcher is different on how they think about things. But generally, like the general first impression is, especially if you're a guy who's young and going to face those two guys, you're like, ugh, like that is, you get more of that than you would have if it's only one of them. And so,
like, I was thinking about Bailey Falter up against the Dodgers yesterday, and I was just like in his honest of hearts, somewhere Bailey Falter's going, crud.
Yes, we're all thinking that. Yeah. It's happening. There's very few people who are just completely like
Like maybe Skenes is
unfazed.
up there and be like, I'm gonna dominate them. I don't care.
Yeah, maybe.
Dodgers, whatever.
But now he's thinking about, I got
Ohtani's
a
pretty
couple
good.
times, so maybe I shouldn't be that confident. And I got to be a little bit more. You got to be willing to kind of swallow your pride a little bit, but to kind of take that to the next level. Now, the bullpen feels more pressure when the offense isn't scoring runs, and vice versa. If the offense scoring a lot of runs, they feel like they need to score more runs because the bullpen can't hold games. So, like once that becomes a thing, like under the surface, pressure starts to form in those groups because of how the other one is performing. But that's when you see when teams are dialed in, usually all of these things are working together. So maybe if their bullpen gets shored up, that actually helps the offense feel a little bit more loose and comfortable because they don't have to score 15 runs to win a game. And so I would say address the thing that is most glaring, and that's the bullpen. Go get a guy like Yimi Garcia would be a great guy to add to that bullpen because he's a fireman type guy, 7th, 8th inning guy. Maybe Neris is a little bit better with that because they're different looks. And maybe now you got 2 guys that are pretty solid back there as opposed to just the one guy who's throwing pretty well and everyone else is struggling. Getting a couple veteran guys to maybe help that out, I think would make the biggest difference for that team.
Yeah, I think if you get one more starter back, which they will soon with Jordan Wicks, maybe you have a little buffer from one of your back-end starters. Ben Brown, who we do like as a starter, could end up being a multi-inning weapon out of the bullpen. That changes the complexion of things really quickly if you start.
He's got great bullpen stuff, too. He could be a guy who just comes out 100, throwing 91-mile-an-hour sliders.
Yeah. But I think they kind of need him too much in the rotation right now. So it's an interesting thing. I do think he'll run out of innings a little bit, and so in the postseason, yeah, I think you go with Shota and then Tyon, and Ben Brown is on active duty ever since that. And
he's warming up every inning for the whole series.
Steele and Tyon, but you're like Ben Brown, like you might be coming on in the 4th.
I think the wild card for the Cubs too is Cade Horton. He's dealing with an injury right now, so he's out 3 to 4 weeks, still at AAA. But I think we'll see him before the end of this season. Maybe he's part of the bullpen solution in the short term, even though he could be that homegrown ace
inside the organization. We got our trade acquisition. It's Cade Horton.
You're right. That's the way they could spin it. Doesn't cost anything. That's the best though.
I don't think
2022 Trevor May. We got him coming back, guys. That's our trade.
I mean, look, if teams that need bullpen help are making phone calls, you might get a call from Jed Horton.
Maybe get out there and do some bullpens.
Yeah, are you ready? Like they might need you.
Hold on, I'll practice real quick. No. I got a podcast. I can't.
We'll see some other
3 cities in 1 week. No.
Yeah, staying home. A lot of top 100 prospects in the system, they could trade guys just below that. Even if they were going to go get another starter, like a Luis Severino, James Triantos could be a player that brings back a rental starter. Like they have guys that aren't necessarily clear parts of their core that other teams would be interested in. So I think that's what makes them dangerous as a team that could go out and make additions mid-season. One other spot that's kind of an open question right now is the role of Christopher Morel. And it looks like he's been kind of unlucky on balls in play so far this season. We knew the defensive shortcomings were there coming into the year, but I thought when we had universal DH added a couple of years back, I thought it would save players like Christopher Morel. And just based on the way Craig Counsell's been talking about him, seeing that they don't really have that defensive home where they could even hide him right now, it seems like there's a lot of pressure on him in the short term to either turn things around offensively or possibly lose a large share of playing time, even though it seems like he's a kind of a core guy in some ways. Like when you watch the Cubs, they feed off of Christopher Morel a little bit, which is strange because he hasn't been there for
a big energy
3-4 years, right? Yeah, like there's just something about him where it seems like the team kind of rallies around him.
It's the whiskers.
It's the whiskers.
It's the whisker eye black. That just tells you all you need to know. Yeah, he's the energy guy. He gets so excited. He just loves being out there, and that's infectious. 100%. I think, and I agree. Even just the Cubs games I've watched, I've just noticed, and of course this isn't backed by any sort of data, but I've noticed like him hit the ball really hard a few times, like just right at people, and like to where it was noticeable, to where I'm like, oh, that's 3 in a row. Like that's right at shortstop, right at third base, and then he hit like a laser into the gap that was just like run down by some top 3 outfielder, right? So he is getting a little bit unlucky. There's also some stuff that's not great about how he's played, but if you can create value for yourself as an energy guy, I highly recommend it for any young guys trying to get up and establish themselves. If you can add that to a clubhouse, it doesn't go unnoticed for sure.
Yeah, I think that Brett Phillips like elongated his time in the game.
That's a great example.
Like he elongated his time in the game because people wanted to be around him. People, even if he was just the backup center fielder, he was going to be a good addition to the team. And he could pitch for you. Morel, what I like is that he's cut his strikeout rate and increased his walk rate, cut his swinging strike rate. There's a lot of good stuff under the hood. He was an extreme puller. He's kind of pulled that back a little bit. He's still hitting the ball really hard. So I just wouldn't be afraid if I were the Cubs. And you can see it in the game log a little bit. I wouldn't be afraid of using him at DH. He's been used at DH 4 out of, I'm eyeballing this, but like basically a third of the time in his last 12 games. And that seems okay to me. It's like we're trying to, get you, there at third base defensively, but I think the bat is valuable enough to keep him out there. The energy's there. So, I'd continue to play him as much as I could. And I don't think he's going to lose playing time other than like maybe at third base as they switch him over to DH. Just embrace it. For what it's worth, I do think that energy guys could be good fits for DH because if they have sort of that natural energy, because one of the things that doesn't work at DH is not being energetic and not, you know what I mean? Like you have to manufacture your energy. You're not out on the field. So David Ortiz did it by being a top step, like future manager type. Yeah. Like up, fastball coming, slider, like calling out pitch types and yelling like, and bringing people up and be like, look at his elbow next time. He's got a tip, that's how, David Ortiz did. I think it's a skill. There's a little bit of a camp in sabermetric circles. Some believe that DHing is not a skill. Some believe it is a skill. And I sit in the camp that it's a skill. That some people like. I think JD Davis had a hard time with it. He was talking about it in San Francisco where he's like, either I got to be on the bike, and if I'm on the bike, I'm in the dark. And if I'm in the dark and I come out to the lights, that's weird. So, but if I stay in the lights and stay in the game, then I'm not warm. So, he doesn't really like DH, and I could see how, not everybody would. But if Morel is a top step guy anyway, maybe you just take advantage of that and say, all right, be top step, be yelling out, be who you are, but not with a glove.
Yeah, I think that could work really well in the long run. I think the bad luck has been there so far for Christopher Morel. Matt Shaw, another name that could eventually take over at third base. Maybe they want a bridge guy. That could be on the wish list. If we turn the dial to buy on the trade maker 3,000, and I think we should for this Cubs team, like, who are you getting? If you're going to add a short-term third baseman, I thought Matt Chapman made sense for them this winter. Obviously, it's not on the table as clearly right now.
They might have been one of the last teams in on him.
Yeah, so Uncle Ted in the Live Hive saying Pete Alonso would be sick at first base for the Cubs. I mean, yeah, like that's the type of type of impact hitter that you could put out there, and that would make a pretty big difference to that lineup in one fell swoop.
That's a good one. They have to give stuff up for that, though. But they have a few guys, and the Mets are looking to add some of those younger guys. They haven't had really a lot of prospects in, I don't know, 10 years. So it's or like a big crew coming up. So that's something they're looking to do. I mean, the Pete's so interesting because so many teams could use Pete, that kind of guy who could hit 18 homers in a month if he gets really, really hot. He's that type of guy. So I mean, I would say that's a really, really good one. Because and correct me if I'm wrong, does Michael Busch also plays third base, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Okay. He can.
You can put him there.
Like Vientos is a third baseman, kind of.
Yeah, kind of like that. I mean, it's not malpractice, but it's not ideal.
Okay. But I mean, if that's your stopgap, I mean, it's not like Morel is lighting it up over there either. So it's like, if that gives you opens up a spot to where Morel is a DH, and then you have a real bopper at first, that might be the way that gets done. And it's Chicago, so like. Even the opportunity, even at least having conversations, if they wanted to say, hey, Pete, like we would like to extend you, whatever, it's a market that could conceivably figure something like that out, as opposed to like maybe other places that just simply will not be able to do it. So he might not even need to be a rental, and that might make it interesting. I mean, he's probably going to be a rental everywhere. I don't know if anyone wants to commit to the type of money he's going to command if he goes, but that does make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see.
There's
of
been
course,
trade interest about Ryan McMahon. The Rockies have said, we're not open for business on that name, but I would listen if I were them.
Yeah.
And
Rockies,
McMahon
should always be open for business. Rockies.
Yeah. And McMahon, I think, would be a really good fit for them. You saw Vlad Guerrero play third this week. It'd be interesting if our two teams at the fork made a match and they start playing Vlad at third. But I mean, that's sort of like, that's the same problem. It's you're shoehorning a bat into third that is probably not a great third baseman with the glove. And then if you start looking at the bad teams, I guess Jake Berger, could be a shot there. But Jake Berger is also the type of player that the Marlins could hold on to because he's under team control to 2029. On the other hand, he's 28 years old.
Yeah, so, that extension of club control on a player that age with that skill set doesn't matter much.
Yeah,
doesn't matter. You move
I could see that.
Right after Jake Berger finally unloaded condo, whatever he had in Chicago, too, after last year's trade, is to go back.
It goes back. I mean, I was looking at Jeimer Candelario's name for a second, and I just don't. With 3 years on that deal, I don't think the Cubs really want to eat up the rest of that money. So I don't see a natural fit unless it's Berger. But what if we built a kind of a fun little mini big deal, which is Tanner Scott and Jake Berger?
I like that.
A lot of your needs.
As someone rooting for a different team in the division, and if that's their move, I'm like, cool, great. You got a little better.
You think that's a medium move. I'm cool with that. Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, you're not worried about that if you're the other teams in that division. You're like, yeah, they got better.
That's not the Pete Alonso, Edwin Diaz package or something that might make you go, oh, you did what?
That would cause more problems for other folks rooting for teams in the NL Central. We are going to go. So I think we're on the buy side on the Cubs, if that was not clear. And they have a lot of interesting ways they could upgrade that roster. But on our way out the door, just a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter. Find Trevor at I am Trevor May. Find Eno at Eno Saris. Find me at Derek Van Riper. Find the pod at Rates and Barrels. You can also join the Discord. The link is in the show description. If you got a question for a future episode, fire it into the mailbag channel on there. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to like this video on YouTube. Leave us a nice rating and review. Have a great weekend. We are back with you on Monday.
Thanks for listening.